Hey, it's Aaron, and today we're talking with Merrick For America. She is an absolutely wonderful YouTube channel personality, and I'm going to give her a little bit of an interview. We're going to talk for a little while, and hopefully we're going to touch on a few things that I think are really important. She is a radical feminist who also works as a sex worker, and does agitprop YouTube videos. Really excited to have you on the show. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Absolutely. So why don't you introduce yourself a little bit better than what I just did and tell us a little bit about your channel and what you do.
Okay. That was a good introduction. I I guess I kind of see myself less seriously. I feel like I'm just kind of an e-slut that's reading books in my underwear, but that's very nice of you. I have been talking about sex work online for a very, very long time. And the last couple of years, I started talking about other sorts of politics, and I got in contact with a very large YouTuber, and he really pushed me in the direction of making my own channel. So a few months ago, it's actually it's not even a few months ago. I think it's like maybe 6 weeks ago at this point. I started my own channel. I got on Twitter, and I've just been trying to grow both of those things. And I have gone from just sharing my opinions on various things to now I read theory in my underwear and piss off what feels like half the left every day.
That's fantastic. You know what? Pissing off half the left is probably the most important thing because, you know, we need to be taken out of our comfort zone sometimes. And I think a lot of the issue since 2016 has been kind of focused on this kind of sex negative feminism that is really not very good for the left. I think that you guys are working really good at doing some activism here, but you're doing it in a way that's very welcoming to newcomers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's what I try to make it accessible. I think that's actually, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's really important, and that's something that people will message me about sometimes, and they'll be like, I feel really uncomfortable and really awkward about this, but you talk about it in a way that doesn't make me feel like some sort of weird incel. So I really appreciate that you bring that up, actually.
No, absolutely. And the thing is, too, is that the first videos that I seen of yours had nothing to do with you reading theory in your underwear. It was all stuff to do with medical supplies, how to make sure that you're helping somebody from having an overdose, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of really important work that is going on your channel. And you really seem to explode in popularity in the last couple of weeks, right? You went from zero subscribers or whatever to like 1,000 subscribers. You might have more than that now. I haven't checked, actually.
I think I'm a little under 2,000, which I don't even think that's impressive at all. I think it's my Twitter account that's actually kind of blown me away. I went from having like 100 followers to having I think I'm approaching 14,000 right now.
Wow, that's incredible. So yeah, I've seen actually a lot of different channels similar to yours blow up in the last little while, specifically Savvy, Tactical Girlfriend, people like that. And it's really cool to actually see the left starting to grow in that direction, kind of in a more sex-positive way. And I really like the way that you guys have been presenting a lot of the information that you're doing. It's kind of a very clever, very crafty way of pushing leftism. I know that one of the things that you've been doing a lot is reading theory and stuff like that and getting people to follow you on OnlyFans and basically pushing leftism that way. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So, okay, this has been really controversial. This, I think, is one of the things that people are really mad at me about, is I will go on live streams on my OnlyFans and I'll get pretty much naked. Sometimes I'm fully naked, sometimes I'm wearing like cute lingerie, whatever, and I'll read while I'm live. So I can talk to people while I'm doing it, I can interact with people, I can answer questions, that sort of thing. So I think I've done that like twice now, maybe? I haven't even really done it that much. But yeah, that's something that if you want to join my OnlyFans, I'll be doing on there. But I also record myself reading essays and chapters, and then I post it up for free on my YouTube too. So there's been some sort of There's been a lot of accusations that I'm like grifting, I guess, because I do this on my OnlyFans. But I would like to clarify that I'm also posting long, full, free readings on my YouTube as well. I'm just not naked on my YouTube. That's really the only difference.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that you're getting a lot of negativity because of that, considering what you're doing is actually really quite clever, right? You're pushing leftism in a direction, in a way that a lot of people haven't been doing in the past. Well, actually, that's not even true. Lots and lots of leftists all throughout history have been pushing that sort of thing. I can even think of a couple of instances. Now, I might be wrong on this, but I think I've seen a couple of communist old Soviet propaganda posters with beautiful women and that sort of thing. And the thing is about anything, right, is that sex sells. And if capitalists are able to use sex to sell cars, right, there's no reason why communists or socialists or anarchists or whatever couldn't use sex to sell a political ideology or a belief system that hopefully will help change the world for the better. So I really appreciate that kind of work. And it's neat because you're thinking out of the box when you're doing it. And I think that's really impressive.
Thanks. I don't really know that I don't really feel like I am thinking out of the box because it's so natural for me. This is what I've always been doing is sex work, so it just makes sense. Also, if you look at fascism, it's very, very good at manipulating aesthetics. So this is not new. And like you were saying, like even, old Soviet propaganda, like this isn't new. People have been doing this for forever. I'm just taking it a bit of a step further and making it a little bit more extreme because I am fully naked on my OnlyFans or because I will be very close to naked on Twitter. So I'm taking it a little bit of a step further. But I watched how Fox News used people and like The Blaze used people who were very cookie cutter attractive. They used these women and it was extremely effective. Tomi Lahren was extremely effective. And I saw that, and she's not a good debater. She's not very articulate. She's not particularly logical, but she's very passionate, and she's conventionally attractive. And so I thought, I have some degree of conventional attractiveness. This is something that I could utilize. I've always been utilizing it. I may as well utilize it to do something more than just make myself money.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that, and that's fantastic. It reminds me a little bit of the Paris Commune, actually. Interestingly enough, at the very beginning of the Paris Commune, it was mostly women that were fighting in the struggle to actually liberate the people in that area. And at the end of the Paris Commune, when everything had gone to rat shit and they had started shelling the area, the last ones that were still fighting were the sex workers, were the escorts and that sort of thing. They were out there fighting for their freedom, fighting for a better world, right? And I think that part of history is not paid enough attention to. So, okay, so what really got you into doing Agitprop online? Was it mostly the Tomi Lahren sort of thing, looking at other women online doing this sort of just trying to sell their conservatism or whatever it is? Is that what made you do this, or what brought you to the idea?
So, okay, I have always had an online community. Unlike a lot of the people in the YouTube Twitter sphere, I was really big on Facebook. I was really big on Facebook for years. And so I'd always been talking about politics over there, but there's not like a political Facebook the way there's a political Twitter, right? So in the people that I was attracting, I was one of the only sex workers that was talking about politics. So people used to meme me all the time. Like this wasn't something that I necessarily one day woke up and was like, oh, I'm just going to do this today. It was sort of like a gradual conclusion that I came to that I could do on my own, right? So like, I don't know. I mean, I'd always talked about politics. People had always fucking memed me. And I was like, you know what? I should just use aesthetics. Like, I should just jump full in and just start doing it. And I'd also been starting to get really into watching political YouTube in the past year or so. So it just seemed natural for me to combine all of these things and try to do it myself.
That makes total sense. Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. Okay, so so you're a sex worker, obviously, and you're also obviously a feminist, right? Like you talk a lot about feminism, or at least you've alluded to a lot on Twitter, that sort of thing. So I'm going to talk about a few questions in regards to that. So how do you think that you can be a good feminist and a sex worker at the same time?
I think that comes down to your understanding of feminism. I think there's a lot of people who subscribe to feminism for me, but not for thee, and it's really, really frustrating. I think if you're sitting here going, you can't be a feminist if you do this, or this. If you're not talking about that person taking conservative action to limit women's freedoms, then you don't really understand feminism. Because to me, feminism is about equality, right? So it's about my ability to make choices for my life with my body, for me, what I want to do. It's that there aren't laws and there aren't rules for me that there aren't for men. So if I want to be a sex worker and you tell me, well, that's not good feminism, you can't do that, you're doing a patriarchy. Sorry.
That's absolutely true. So then...
I do. So whenever you're sitting here, yeah, I think swerves are extremely patriarchal.
I think that's totally true. So then what is your idea of a good feminist?
Someone who does fight for that equality, someone who their rhetoric is consistently that of, women are whole and complete human beings, not based on what they do, but because they are human beings. Someone who looks at, when Ben Shapiro makes claims like that and says, if you want to stay home and be a homemaker and you don't want to go to college, well, you're not a whole and complete human being because you didn't go get higher education. You're a whole and complete human being because you are equal, full stop. That's all there is to it. There's not some biological inequality between people which makes one class of people superior to the other, right? And so it's the same thing with sex work. Like, if I want to go fucking bust it open, like, that's my choice, that's my right, and that doesn't demean my status as a human being at all. So I think a good feminist is someone who recognizes that fact and whose rhetoric mirrors that and whose actions mirror that.
That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. So, do you think that's so? Like a thing that I've heard a lot is that, especially in leftist spaces, is that whenever somebody is using their body to to make money or however it is, they usually see it as an exploitative situation, and all work is exploitative, obviously. But my question to you is, do you think that sex work can be empowering, or do you think that it's inherently predatory? Or both?
So I think that this comes down to what you think sex work is. I have been having a lot of conversations lately about how I am the new boogeyman of the left because I am introducing predatory men to women's spaces, and I am talking about sex work as a revolutionary act and how that's wrong. So I've been having these conversations a lot, and yeah, I believe that under a capitalist system, all work is exploitative. Yeah, I agree with that. However, I think if you're going to try to sit here and tell me that me posting pictures of my tits on OnlyFans is somehow worse than being paid $7.25 an hour and having taxes taken out. Let me give you a really specific example. So here's how OnlyFans works. I set the price, and people can decide whether they want to pay that price monthly for access to whatever it is that I choose to post, right? So if I want to post pictures of my feet all damn day, I can do that. If I want to post pictures of my fucking book collection and people want to pay for that, I can do that. If I want to post triple anal every fucking day, I can do that, you know? So it's like I have this don't expect that if you sign up. So I have this this control, right? This ability to set my price and to dictate what actions I am or am not going to do. Now, when I was 19 or 20, I worked for this restaurant here in Austin that still exists, so I will not be naming them. And they had me get up at 6:30 in the morning, and I rode my bike over to wherever it was, and I worked for like 7 hours, and they paid me $8 an hour, and I was a hostess, I was a busser, I was a waitress. They paid me $50 every once in a while to come and clean the entire building. I did everything, right? And so when people sit here and they tell me that that's so much more exploitative, I think it really comes down to people who have maybe live with mommy and daddy. And I think it's maybe people who think that all sex work is survival street full service work. I think it comes from a place of deep ignorance.
That's fair. Do you think that under a capitalist system or the system that we're living under now, do you think that it's possible to stay confident and an independent sex worker without being exploited?
Fully and completely, no.
Yeah.
But I mean, so like even in my situation, OnlyFans takes 20% of what I make.
No, exactly. Under capitalism, every job is going to be exploitative, right? This isn't actually in my questions, but something that I've actually heard a lot of people say, and maybe I'll just get your opinion on this, is that, say, after the revolution, once there's no more money and once there's a completely different economic system and that sort of thing, do you think that sex work would even exist? Or do you think that it's something that would continue to exist considering it's one of the oldest industries in the world?
So this one is difficult because I want to say that no, it won't exist, but I still think that people will. Man, even if there's not money and all people's needs are met, I think people will still fuck for things. I think people will still, I don't know what things they will be, but this does seem to be human nature. This is something that we've seen since the beginning of forever. So I have a hard time going, oh yeah, it'll just be done, it'll just go away. I could be wrong, but I don't really have enough information to accurately answer that, I think. But I doubt it.
That's fair. You know, because like I watch a lot of nature documentaries, and funny enough, it sits in my head. I was watching a bunch of African bonobos the other day. They're very sexual creatures. I think that they're bonobos. They're very sexual creatures, and they'll actually exchange sex for different things. They'll exchange sex for bananas. They'll exchange sex for a back rub. I don't think that no matter, even if we eliminated money, if we eliminated all of these things, I still feel as though people would want to trade certain things for other things. You're going to have one guy that makes a really beautiful dress. You have one girl that makes a really beautiful necklace, and you have somebody else that's really beautiful and wants to trade that for, or trade their, sexual proclivity or whatever for those sorts of things. I'm probably using all of the wrong words, but like I still feel like that would probably be a thing that exists. It feels like it would be hard for us to eliminate all forms of trading entirely, and that's kind of what we're talking about when you're talking about eliminating sex work entirely.
Well, yeah, exactly. And like, say we're working off some sort of trade system, right? Like you're talking about, oh, well, there's no money anymore. And someone's like, yeah, I can do this for you. You know, you have to do whatever this service is for me. I have to make a couple of these for other people first. If I'm like, well, what if we just do a little sucky, you bring me to the front? Like things like that will always happen, you know? So I think it's really, really silly for people to be like, we will abolish it. Like, I don't really know if it's going to end up working out like that.
Now, I've touched on this a little bit in our personal messages and stuff like that. But I never actually asked you this question. Are you actually part of a sex worker union? And if so, or if not, have you ever thought about unionizing or talking to anybody about that sort of thing?
I think it's like illegal to be in any sort of union if you're in Texas. I don't think.
What? Really? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm just sad. Always sad every time I hear these things. Like any kind of. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you try to start a union in Texas, the sheriff just comes to your house and shoots you out back with a 12 gauge. I don't think that's a law here.
It's a little different in Texas than it is in Canada, clearly. Have you ever thought about, now, if it's illegal to form a union or whatever, I completely understand why you wouldn't want to go down that path. Have you ever thought about looking into the IWW and having something sort of more like a worker-led union? Or
So I don't actually know if it's illegal to start a union. I am completely talking shit. Please don't clip this and post it everywhere about what a fucking idiot I am. I don't know. But I think it's something that has been tried before, where we try to band together and we try to become employees, and then we demand that clubs treat us better, and then it ends up everyone makes less money. So this is stuff that I've heard a lot about, and I wouldn't know how to go about doing that in a way that would meet everyone in my, like, say in my city. I wouldn't know how to go about doing that in a way that meets everyone's needs, because there's different kinds of clubs. They have different rules. In California, they tried to make sex workers employees in the strip clubs to make conditions better for them. And then it just ended up that the clubs were like limiting everyone's hours. And then you couldn't leave if you wanted to. You had to stay your whole shift, and you you had to like fight for shifts, and there were managers' favorites, and it just became a whole messy ordeal. So I think trying to start a union for sex workers would be difficult. One, because full service sex work is illegal, and two, because the strip clubs do everything in their power to make sure to fuck you over at all turns. So even if you tried to get the law involved in some way that would help us, they would 100% find a way to circumvent that and to continue to abuse us and abuse those laws.
It sounds like you're describing Walmart or Amazon or literally every other business. That's how it is, right? If you own a business, you're going to exploit people. Your workers are nothing more than a commodity, a way for you to make money off of. So yeah, it always makes it really difficult. And I think, because I've talked to a couple of sex workers before about unionizing and that sort of thing, and a lot of people have told me that they think it's a really great idea. The problem with unions is that you always have the corruption from the top. You always have a lot of these different problems. They get infiltrated by capitalists and that sort of thing. So that's why I always try to promote, and here's my shameless promotion for the IWW. I always try to promote the IWW as much as I can. Check them out. They will definitely help you work towards being able to create not just a union, but a worker-led union. And radical unionizing is really a way that we can get together. And getting involved in a radical union is one of the best ways that we can actually work together and fight for the things that we believe in the world. Like I've said, and like many posters have said, united we bargain, divided we beg. And we have to take that slogan into our hearts, into our heads, into our minds, and hopefully into the streets. So yeah, if you get a chance, join the IWW, look them up, and hopefully you yourself can work on creating your own radical union. And hopefully, Merrick, you could look into it as well, and maybe you might be able to start some kind of crazy radical union. Who knows?
Yeah, that's neat. I actually don't really know much about them, so I will go look at that when this is over.
That sounds awesome. So we've also discussed a little bit in DMs, and obviously you've said this on Twitter a few times. You've posed with a few controversial books, I would say. Would you consider yourself a political radical?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's fair. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your political journey and where you're at right now?
Okay. So I was raised in two households, one of which was extremely conservative, very racist, and I was raised in another household where we didn't really talk about politics. My mother's always been very liberal, like the kind of person who, when I was like, Mom, is there a God? She's like, I don't know, probably not, whatever, who cares? Like, she's just very, like, casually, whatever. So she was never very politically active, but she did instill in me views that opposed conservative ones. So I just grew up being kind of default liberal because things that were said at the conservative household that I grew in were so egregious that I was like, maybe that's not for me. And when I got a little bit older, I hate this. So when I was like 21 or 22, I ended up dating someone who was really abusive and who was very conservative, and it did a lot to my self-esteem and really kind of, broke me down. And I started to eventually take on a little bit more of his political views. And at the time, I was having some problems in my workplace, and I just started to become a little bit more friendly towards right-wing ideas. So I flirted with that for a little bit, and then I got out of that relationship, and then I started asking myself, why did I just believe these things as a kid, and why was it so easy for this person to convince me that I was wrong? So I started looking into why I believed what I believed, and asking if the arguments that I had heard people making that sounded right to me, if they were sound. And as I did that, I ended up moving way further left than I had ever been before, actually. And I guess now I just considered myself liberal as I was coming back out of that. I was like, wow, that was like this horrible, nightmare that I went through, and I'm out of it. And I guess, I really am a liberal. And so now I don't even feel that way anymore. Now I feel very differently, and I'm, I would say I'm much further left now than I ever was.
That's really interesting. Now, I can cut this part out, but are you comfortable saying that you're an anarchist or no? If you're not, then you don't have to. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, I've gotten to the point now where I find the state to be oppressive, and that's really the only way that I view it. I view the state as violent and oppressive. And I had always sort of thought that this country was... I always kind of knew we were the baddies. Like, that was never really in question for me. So I think it was really easy for me to take it even a step further and go, hey, not only are we a bad nation, but the system that we have in place is also bad. I think there's a lot of propaganda that we are instilled with, especially here in the South. Like, I don't know what you know about Texas, but we were our own republic at one point, and we'll tell you about it. There's this patriotism that's really instilled, and we have to say the Texas pledge. Like, we have to pledge allegiance to the Texas flag and the American flag.
Really?
So, yes.
I didn't. I know very little. I live like millions of miles away.
So we have to take Texas history like 3 times in public school, like 3 years of it.
Wow.
Throughout. Yeah. And I took like 1 semester of world history and like 1 semester of econ, 1 semester of government, and I took 3 years of Texas history. So there's so much, and this is a very red state. This is a very conservative state, and I live in the little blue dot in the middle of this big red sea. But even here in Austin, I mean, Alex Jones thrived here. So, like, even here in Austin, there's a lot of conservatives. And so, I grew up just kind of... I didn't know that there was options other than capitalism. Like, I thought everywhere was capitalist. I thought that's just how it was.
Yeah.
And no one ever tells you, hey, you cannot do that, right? Like, they tell you that communism failed and that communism is gone and it's over and it was bad and everybody starves under communism and the party controls everything and it's just a bad time. So, like, I didn't know that there were still communist places. People will say that China is communist, but I knew that their economy was sort of mixed. So, like, I didn't know that Vietnam is a communist country. I had no idea.
Right.
So... I started looking into more of that, and then, I started learning more about U.S. imperialism. And I was introduced to the concept of U.S. imperialism and the war on terror when I was like 14. And so even as a very young person, I've always kind of thought that this country was the world's police. And I've always really thought that this country was doing things that were unethical. And I had a really, really strong emotional connection to September 11th. And so I started looking into what happened in Iraq. And I started looking into the way we mismanaged 9/11. And I've always known us to be a country at war. I was like 7 years old when 9/11 happened. So my entire perspective of this country is us in a bullshit illegal war. So I think whenever I started to say to myself, why do I really feel the way I feel about politics, and what do I really know about economics? I was coming from this place of really being resentful of this country. And I discovered anarchism, and I thought that anarchism was a free-for-all. Like, the only thing I knew about anarchism was something that this kid said to me one time when I was in high school, and he was like, if this was anarchy, I would kill you for your shoes. And so, like, that to me was like the only thing I'd ever heard anyone say about it. And then I started reading about it, and I was like, oh, wow, this is so much different than the way that people portray it. Yeah. It's so much more organized and ethical and responsible. And to me, it's what makes the most sense, because how can you sit here and say that corrupt, rich, exploitative bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. know what my neighborhood needs? Yeah. How can you ever make that argument?
Yeah. No, I totally understand that position. I make that argument every single day. It's impossible for somebody 100 miles away to know that your streets need to be paved, or that your neighbor's fence needs to be fixed, or that 6 or 8 buildings down your block have just been boarded up or shut down or torn down for whatever reason, maybe to build some capitalist business that has no reason to even be there. I know that that's happening in close to my area. I live in a 100-year-old neighborhood, and they've started to go around cutting down 100-year-old trees and putting up, capitalist businesses there, getting rid of like family-run stores and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's hard going through the world knowing what you do. And seeing all of the injustices and all of the problems, and knowing that there is an actual solution out there to fix it, it almost feels like screaming into a pillow, or like when you're laying in bed and you're kind of awake but you're kind of asleep and you feel like you want to scream but you can't. That's kind of the feeling that I constantly get whenever I have this like kind of conversation.
So we have something. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
So we have essentially that times like 10 here in Austin. Yeah. So I don't know, do you know anything about Austin at all?
Just a little bit, not very much.
Okay, so I'm a second generation Austinite. My mom was born here in like 67, and Austin used to be a very different town. Austin used to be a town, not a city. And it was smaller, it was funky, and it was known for people smoking pot and like older hippies living here, and keep Austin weird is our slogan. And now Austin is this tech bro one of the fastest growing cities in the country. It's really difficult to afford to live here. Like, for a long time when I was younger, I did survival sex work to be able to afford to live in my hometown, because you can't find a place. I can find a good amount of 500 square foot apartments for $1,700. There's been this huge real estate boom here, and it has radically priced people out of their own homes. Gentrification here is absolutely out of control. And people get pushed further and further and further out of the city. And this was always a segregated city. So we have I-35, which you're probably familiar with because it runs from Mexico to Canada. Okay. So I-35 runs right through Austin. It's one of the biggest highways in the country, right? And so there is East Austin on the east side of the highway, and then there's, Central, West, all the other side of Austin on the other side of the highway. It goes right through the middle of town. And Black people and Hispanic people used to live on the east side, and that's just where they lived. And now the east side is being gentrified by white hipsters, and so now they live even further out, and they just further and further and further and further and further all the time. So, I saw this happening in my own home too. And housing prices are ridiculous. Like, if I wanted to buy a house in this neighborhood, it would cost me $450,000, $500,000. And I live at the southernmost exit of the city. I'm like in the suburb.
Wow, that is an incredibly high amount of money. And there's a lot of other places that are like that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, like, these aren't even crazy houses. These aren't even like manors or mansions or anything. This is just a regular house. $450,000, $500,000.
That's outrageous. Yeah. And like here, if you drive an hour outside of the city, you can buy an entire house for like whatever. I think it's like $200,000 in some places, $150,000 in others.
That actually hurts me. That's so cheap.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's cheap, but you're also living in the middle of fucking nowhere, right? Like, probably septic tank and no water, no fresh water, that sort of thing. But if that sort of thing appeals to you, come on up to Canada. You won't be able to order a pizza, but you have moose walking through your front yard, like, every day, so it's totally fine.
That sounds incredible. Are you kidding me? This is me packing my bags right now.
Oh, perfect. Awesome. All right. Well, to get a little bit back to where I was going with the whole thing that I was talking about, there's an old saying that goes, "Those who know don't sleep," and I feel like leftists and anarchists and communists and that sort of thing, we know, so we never sleep. Do you find it more difficult to go through life seeing all of these injustices, seeing all of these different things like the boarded up buildings, like the gentrification, like the racism, the sexism, all of these things, SWERFs and TERFs and all of that? Do you find it harder to navigate through that now that you know more, now that you've kind of come through to the other side and now see all of these problems for what they actually are?
So something about me that I'm going to open up about, and it's probably going to come back to bite me in the ass because people are horrible. I'm really sensitive. I'm a huge baby, but I've always been this way. Even as a child, like, my mom tells me stories about me seeing homeless people and just crying, like being so fucking upset about it. I've always been really, really upset about the injustices that happen around us and how there's nothing I can do about it. And as I learn more, does it get worse? Oh, yeah, definitely. This, like, crushing existential dread at all times where you're like, there's only so much that I can do, and there's so many fucking GoFundMes online for people who need medical treatment, who are going to be homeless. Like, I know that we have, we're projected to see a 40% increase in homelessness. They're saying something like 20 million to 28 million people are going to be facing eviction as we move forward, knowing that the opioid crisis is only getting worse, knowing that Black people have to worry every day that they leave their house if they're going to be assassinated by the police. Like, it's, knowing that sex workers are doing, like, survival sex work the same way that I had to, and they're being put in dangerous situations, and they're going into hotel rooms, and they're 18 years old with just some dude, and it's just them and that dude. Like, there's just so much that's happening right now that I have to take breaks. Like, I have to step back from my phone. I have to not read the news sometimes because it's just so much and it's so overwhelming, and I'll just shut down. Like, I just can't function if I fixate on it too much, because I'm no good to anyone if I'm like a blubbery emotional mess, So yeah, it's really, really hard.
The thing is, though, is that I feel like there is a lot of hope right now, a lot more hope than there was in the past. A lot of people that thought the way that we did over the course of years, generations even, they've seen all of these problems, and there's never been any sort of real solution. There's never ever been any real momentum moving towards something better. But now it really seems like there is. Obviously, it's scary, terrifying, horrifying in some situations, but also a little bit hopeful, especially with all of these protests that have been happening around George Floyd and other people that have been murdered. I see a lot of momentum moving towards the right direction with all of that. Unfortunately, a lot of things have moved towards the wrong direction as well, especially with a lot of the different murders and stuff like that have been happening in the last few days, which my heart goes out to every single person that's out there, the family members, the friends, all of those people. But what do you think about the way all of this is moving? What do you think about the protests? Do you think that they're a source for good? Do you think that it's maybe a sign that we're moving towards something better? And does it make you scared or does it make you hopeful? What is your feeling on that?
I worry. I think it's more. I think it's more an indicator that people are not doing well. People are really suffering. And I don't want to be a negative Nancy about it, and I don't want to be really depressing about it, but these things are not happening because people are safe and secure and they're happy. These things are happening because people are miserable and they're suffering and they've had enough of the boot on their neck. I also think that a lot of what's happening right now is sort of not targeted, maybe in a way that would be most effective, right? So, like, I'm never going to get mad at someone for burning down I don't know, pick a business. I'm never going to chastise anyone for doing that. I'm never going to get mad at anyone for doing that. I'm also not going to say on camera that I advocate for people burning down police stations because I think that would be a very dumb thing to say on camera. But I do think that some of the just lashing out is maybe not strategic. And I know that this is something that I'm going to get dragged for endlessly, and I just don't care. I worry that people who are centrists and people who are right-wingers are looking at what's happening, and I don't know how to reach them and how to make them understand that this doesn't come from a place of just like spoiled, entitled people who are upset about nothing and who are just wantonly lashing out. Like, I see a lot of that rhetoric as well, and I think that's fucking ridiculous. I think that if you pay any attention to our history or to what's happening right now, everything that is happening at these protests absolutely makes sense. And I think if you try to shit on that, you're lacking in a lot of empathy, right? Or if you try to criticize it from a point of view without understanding why it's happening, I think you're lacking a lot of empathy, and I don't really have a lot of respect for those takes. I think a lot of the property damage and destruction is unavoidable. I don't think that property will ever come close to human life, so I do see those takes as well, and I think they're absolutely disgusting. I understand where we're at. I don't know that it's something that makes me hopeful, though. I think it's something that makes me a little bit nervous, especially because I see a lot of people talking about it on the left in ways that indicate to me they have no head for strategy. That they don't know how to legitimately organize, and that they're coming from a very wounded emotional place, which, again, I'm never going to condemn anyone for that, and I understand that, but I just don't know how productive that is if we really want to make long-lasting change.
A lot of these protests, and yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow, but a lot of the protests are unorganized. Protests in general, and usually when these sorts of things happen, they spontaneously erupt. They happen in an unorganized fashion. And when that happens, right, a lot of the worst elements of society end up coming out and thriving in that. Bo talks a lot about that. I talk a lot about that. Whenever there is the chance of some sort of disturbance, some sort of civil disturbance, or God forbid a civil war, it isn't the people that are good people. It isn't the people that have the best of intentions that end up thriving in that sort of situation. It's the monsters. Yeah, those are the people that die first. Exactly. The monsters are the ones that survive and thrive in that sort of situation, and trying to push towards having that sort of thing happen is not the direction anybody needs to go. And without having the left fully organizing with one another so they can actually fight in a real way, not in a disorganized way, is the most important, because if we're not doing that, then we're inevitably going to just being cachet boxes for these monsters that want to come by. It doesn't matter if you're an old boomer that's been collecting guns for 30 years. some kid with a rifle and a lot more stamina or whatever is going to come out. He's going to do something terrible to you, and all of those weapons, all of those supplies and everything like that, it's gone. Another thing, too, is that when nations start to become destabilized, other countries start getting involved as well. And it starts to become like this big tinderbox. And that's why you have to be organized. That's why people have to be getting involved in community organizations. You have to be talking to your family, talking to your friends, talking to your neighbors, getting out there and actually making your communities better and making them closer and tighter. Without having that, at the end of the day, we're going to end up in a situation not dissimilar to a lot of the other places that have had things like this before. The Troubles come to mind immediately. Yugoslavia comes to mind, though I really don't think anything like that is going to happen. I hope that nothing like that would ever happen. I also know that you have personally been doing something that I've been advocating for a lot lately, and I think it's really important, which is doing a little bit of rifle training and training in general. I think, and before we talk about that, because I want you to tell me a little bit about that, I want to stress strongly that being armed is very important, but not the best possible solution when you're running out into the middle of something like a protest where there are a bunch of explosions and gas and stuff like that going off. You could be putting yourself or many, many other people at risk if you don't have the proper training. So you have to be trained very well, and having a bunch of untrained people running out into a situation like that with firearms can lead to incredible disasters. We've seen what happened with that Kyle Rittenhouse character. We've seen what has happened with other people as well, and it leads to more problems. So training is one of the most important things. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the training that you've been doing recently?
Sure. So first of all, I want to say thank you for having my back on the not ramping up and agitating the Civil War rhetoric, because I've been getting dragged so fucking hard for that. It's so ridiculous. A lot of people have decided that I am an anti-revolutionary, racist, white moderate for being like, hey guys, we don't really want to do a civil war. So thank you for having my back on that. It's been very frustrating. As far as training goes, yeah, I mean, that's something that I really like to talk about it a lot, because this kind of comes back to modeling what the right wing does. They love tan, blonde women in bikinis with guns. They love it. They literally jerk off to it, right? So I saw a lot of that, and I was like, ooh, we could do something like that, but we could do it responsibly and not shitty. So I started posting pictures with some of my guns, and I try to accompany it with responsible language, right? So I think I like that you brought up Bo as well, because for a while I was neutral on guns. Like, you know, I'm from Texas. We have a lot of guns here. You know, I was never like scared of them. I've always been around them. But at one point I was not really informed about a lot of gun stuff. So I would hear about gun legislation, and I would hear about, you know, these mass shootings, and I would be like, wow, yeah, you know, we do need this gun control, or we do need that gun control. I have 4 siblings, and all 4 of them are in high school. So, you know, when these school shootings are happening, I was really ignorant about guns, I was like, you know, every day is a new day where I could get a phone call that one of my siblings is murdered, you know, is dead. That's really stressful. So I came across Bo's channel, and he had all this stuff up about guns. And everybody goes to Bo's channel and they're like, oh, what's this dipshit gonna say, right? But I saw the way that he was writing his titles, and I was like, this is like, he's doing this on purpose, right? So like, what does this person have to say? Also, the algorithm tends to not refer right-wingers to me, so I was like, okay, this could be interesting. So I watched something that he had to say. I think the first one was like what it's like to be Black in America. And I was like, okay, this is really cool. This is very pleasant. I like what this person has to say. So I started watching his series on guns. And I realized that I didn't know very much about them at all. I didn't know that an assault weapon or an assault rifle, like, that doesn't mean anything, you know? So I started hearing him talk about gun control, and I started reading more into it and looking into it for myself. And now I try to make sure that when I post my guns, I do what he does, and I really, really emphasize responsibility, because I don't want to put out images that are just a fetishization of guns. I think I want to put out an image that is accompanied with something that says, hey, you know, this is a tool that you have to respect. This is something that you are in control of, and your actions while you have this item are what matters, right? So we want to be able to defend ourselves. We want to be able to not be targets. We want to make sure that women, trans people, non-binary people, people of color, sex workers, we want to make sure that these people are not just targets, right? Because these are the people who are often targets, especially because the people who would be targeting them, typically right-wingers, are loaded to their fucking teeth. So I did survival sex work for a long time, and I came to realize that being a pro a lot of gun control and not taking a firm stance on guns was really kind of taking this pro stance of whatever happens to these people happens to these people. And I found that to be kind of immoral. So now I like to talk about guns as not an item that you use to agitate, but an item that you get to know to be secure.
Yeah. No, I think that's really really intelligent, and unfortunately, the funny thing about that is that that's kind of the way that most other countries look at guns, right? Is that it's not something that you immediately jump to solve all of your problems. It's something that you might need it at some point to help you in some way, whether it be through hunting, whether it be through protection or that sort of thing. And I noticed that specifically in America, it's frustrating to me because I'm surrounded by a lot of leftists are Canadian, but most of them are American in the circles that I run in. And I feel like the one aspect that a lot of people from America don't pay attention to is that killing somebody isn't always the best solution. Right? It's like we always, I say we, it's like they are always jumping, not to generalize, I'm sorry, but a lot of people are jumping towards immediately saying, oh, well, this person chased me, this person pushed me, this person sprayed pepper spray at me, or whatever it is, I have to kill them. And I feel like that's not the direction that we need to be going in. You need to be thinking things rationally, thinking things through. I've been in several situations where I've been chased or attacked or whatever, and I've had to use my brain or my legs or something like that to get me out of that situation. It never even occurred to me to ever use a gun in a situation like that. And it's frustrating to me when people, political streamers and that sort of thing, make the arguments that, well, either he should have shot him at this point or he should have shot him at that point. It's like, well, wait, maybe he didn't need to be shot at all. Maybe we could have worked this out in a different way.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is really this fetishization of violence that we have. And it's funny. It's kind of a hard line to walk, which is why I try so hard to stress the messaging that I do with all of my photos that I post, because this happens to me all the time, that people will take things that I say and they'll screen cap it and they'll put it next to my photo and they'll be like, oh, this you? And I'm like, yeah, yes, that is me. Like as if it's somehow hypocritical to own and pose with a gun and also talk about responsible ways of de-escalating situations. I don't see these as being mutually exclusive at all. I think it's actually really important to show that we are armed. I think aesthetics matter, and I think that the way that I'm choosing to utilize and manipulate aesthetics is effective, and that I'm doing it in an ethical way. Some people may disagree with me, but there's a lot of, if you really get into it, a lot of right-wingers will say things to you like, y'all can't buy guns fast enough, or we're armed and you're not. So I don't know if you've seen any rhetoric like that online, but because I have the gun in my profile picture, my Abby, I get this all the time. Constantly right-wing men telling me how they're going to kill me, you know? So I do think that it's important to a degree where we are at right now to put out this message of we're peaceful, but we are prepared. I think that's really important, and that's something that I'll say all the time, right? Peaceful, but prepared. So what you talk about when you're talking about people posting things like, oh, you should have shot him then, you should have shot then, you should have shot then, that to me is very counterproductive and not helpful. That is this fetishization of violence, right? So, you know, I've had someone come into my house in the middle of the night and hold me at gunpoint. I've had someone try to carjack me and slit my throat with an empty bottle from my car. Like, I've been in violent situations, you know, and that's not even, those are stuff that weren't even happening while I was doing sex work.
Wow.
So, like, I've been in violent situations, and I always recommend to people that you need to be calm, that you need to try to de-escalate the situation, that you need to try and do everything in your power to bring the temperature down, and that if you're going to kill someone, if you're going to shoot someone, that should be the last thing you ever do, because you live with that for the rest of your life. You live with that for the rest of your life. Your family lives with that for the rest of their life. Who knows if that person could have turned a corner or turned a new leaf? Who knows if they were actually going to kill you? Like, you know, their family lives with that forever. Like, you change so many things when you actually do kill someone. So I completely agree with you. I think using our brains and having a higher degree of emotional intelligence and actually applying that in situations is something that we need to talk about more and to prioritize.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, I have two questions left for you, and then we're going to wrap it up. So, basically, what do you want to achieve from your channel, and why don't you tell us where we can find you?
I want to explain how I feel about things in an accessible way. I want to make concepts like patriarchy and sex work, which seem so radically misunderstood, accessible. Like, a lot of the people that argue with me online, because I'm of the opinion that voluntary sex work in the Western world fights a lot of patriarchal notions. And when I say things like that, people get very angry with me. And I think that it's pretty widely misunderstood. So I want to make concepts like this more common in the public discourse. And I also want to offer a sex worker's perspective on things like gender and patriarchy and sex work. And I feel like so many people talk for us and about us and don't listen to us. So that's a lot of what I want to do with my channel. I'm also like reading the theory in my underwear, because I know that there are leftists who are already leftists who don't want to read or who don't have the time to read. It's easy to put on something like an audiobook in the background and just listen to it. Or, you know, and people will fight me all day on this too. I really believe that if people can be like, what is this bimbo doing? What is this sexy bimbo with a book doing? You know, like, I really think that you can have people go, this is not what I expect. I don't expect to see someone who looks like that with a book in front of them, you know? And I think if you can pique people's interests and you can subvert their expectations, that you sort of throw them off their guard, and you open them up to what it is that you're going to say and new ideas. And you know, I've had centrists and I've had conservatives message me and be like, wow, I just wanted to jerk off to you at first. I didn't realize that you could say polysyllabic words, you know? Like, I didn't realize that you had any sort of brain. And I don't agree with you about everything, but you've made me think about myself differently. I get messages like that on Twitter all the time. People leave YouTube comments like that. And so a lot of my goal is actually very similar to what Bo does, is that I would like to subvert expectations, and I would like to make things accessible to people who maybe want to learn a little bit more or who maybe know nothing at all. And you can find me on YouTube and on Twitter. I am Merrick DeVille is my @ on Twitter, and you can also just find me by Merrick For America on either Twitter or YouTube, and that's MERRICK.
That's awesome. And you know, you make a really good point when you're bringing up this whole thing about it's just some bimbo reading a book and you never thought that they had brains and that sort of thing. And that is the same kind of toxic mentality that has led, unfortunately, a lot of leftists to believe that whenever a woman is doing something that is related to theory or praxis or whatever, and they're doing it while being beautiful, somehow it's like a counter-revolutionary or something like that. It's absolute nonsense. Anyway, thank you so much for talking to me today, Merrick. I really appreciate everything you and your channel are doing. And I'm going to leave links in the description box below and hopefully at the card at the end to all of her social media. So please definitely go and check her out. And like, comment, subscribe, hit the little bell button, because you know they are not going to let you know when I put out a video. They're definitely not going to let you know when she puts out a video. And make sure you're subscribed, because they're unsubscribing people every single day. So thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day.